Hello, respective viewers. I'm George from Ireland. Welcome back to my channel. So there's more worrying news coming out of occupied Ukraine. So those eastern Ukrainian districts, which are partly under illegal Russian military occupation, Donetsk and Luhansk, have these Moscow-installed administrations. And so the pro-Moscow collaborators announced today that they intend to hold, or should I say stage, referenda from the 23rd to the 27th of this month. That's staggering. What, only 3 days to prepare a referendum, which shows you just how unserious it's going to be as an exercise in democracy, a complete sham. Now, Putin's held obviously several elections, referenda, where there was absolutely flagrant ballot stuffing on an enormous scale. With there's irrefragable proof of that from cameras that are there in the polling stations when the polling officials look to see nobody's coming, and then they put more ballot papers in and so on. So there's going to be a massive scale cheating in this one, I don't doubt, and it'd be more than your life's worth to campaign or to vote for these regions to stay where they are as Ukrainian sovereign territory. But why are they doing this now? They had initially said we're going to have to postpone that because Ukraine's liberating this territory. They're doing it because then they're just going to claim that this land is Russia. Remember, at the beginning of this war, which Putin won't even admit is a war, he disavowed any thought of claiming a millimeter of Ukrainian soil. So that was yet another blatant lie. Just like for months, they lied and lied and lied and lied and say that they were not going to invade Ukraine, that this massive military buildup was no threat to anyone, despite then threatening Ukraine, specifically say, if you don't give us what we want, there'll be a military technological response. Well, that is war. And then lying, claim that a war is not a war, that attack by land and sea and air is not a war, and so on. It is a war, an illegal war, as ruled by the International Court of Justice. So Russia, obviously, they recognize these breakaway regions, the Luhansk People's Republic and the Donbass People's Republic, as independent countries just before Russia launched this full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Up until this point, there've been a rather limited war for 8 years, a little bit of skirmishing, and this was an attempt to swallow the country whole. So it's all going to a plan, remember, by the way. So yeah, Russia's 3-day campaign is on day 211, if my computation is correct right now. Anyway, so the Ukrainian foreign minister has correctly denounced this thing as a complete legal nullity. It's going to be an absolute farce, and so on. So just tonight, the Russian State Duma, as in their parliament, is voting on bringing in martial law in Russia, and saying that we'll recognize the outcome of the referendum, which are going to be held in East Ukraine. And remember, at the Russian Security Council meeting just before the war began, Sergei Narishkin, a real dimwit, let the cat out of the bag. Putin said, well, do you agree with what we're doing? He says, yes, I agree that we're going to take Luhansk and Donetsk into Russia. And even Putin was amused, said, that's not what we're discussing. What we're discussing is to recognize them as independent countries. And as I said at the time, looking back on my channel, that's step one. Step two was to then claim they're being reintegrated into the Russian Federation, not that they were ever part of it. But the Russian Empire, there's this Novorossiya idea of just Russia annexing her neighbors, attempting the erasure of the Ukrainian nation. And obviously, if Ukraine is to fall victim to them, they will try that with Georgia and Moldova. And perhaps Putin's mistake was not to pick on someone much smaller, Georgia, which he outnumbers by so much more. So there's talk of Russia organizing mass military mobilization because they're going to have to, because they sent 200,000 troops into Ukraine. About half of those are lost. They're really struggling. There was this lightning Ukrainian counteroffensive in East Ukraine since I think it's the 6th of September, but that appears to have petered out. They overstretched supply lines, and they met stiffer Russian resistance. So the deputy head of the Russian Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, said that these votes, which would be held in Donetsk and Luhansk, would be correcting a historical injustice. And remember, he was briefly president 2008-2012, Medvedev. So this comes from no mean source, and he says that if they are taken into Russia, then they can never ever be given away, because remember, a referendum in Russia a couple of years ago passed a clause to say that Russia can never, ever give away a single inch of its sovereign soil. Um, Now, if Russia declares these to be Russian and Ukraine carries on trying to retake its territory, Russia will say they're being invaded, which makes conscription easier to justify. They might be attempting to hold such a referendum in the Zaporizhia region and so on. There's never going to be a free or fair vote, and there's no free media in Russia. So those who are illegally occupying the region cannot supervise a fair referendum. And remember, in Donetsk region, is actually the Ukrainians have held most of Donetsk now. They hold only a tiny bit of Luhansk. So it's all very worrying. And the Russians are obviously a bit frightened, and maybe it's planning to distract public attention from the recent defeats, some sort of good news for Putin to sell his people. Um, they're bogged down in Kherson. The Ukrainians don't appear to be trying to break into the city, and heavy fighting there, though they take very heavy counters as they did, but they're bombarding with their much more accurate weapons. The problem is obviously Western countries just not providing weapons and fast enough, particularly Germany not following through on its promises to deliver weapons. Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, just today she announced several $100 million dollars worth of additional military aid, and multiple rocket launch systems will be part of that. So yeah, I thought that they're following their book of tactics, the Russians that they used when they annexed Crimea. Now, so were a vote held on a completely fair basis in Donetsk and Luhansk, it's possible that they would vote to join Russia, even if not a substantial minority would vote for that. But nevertheless, even if 100% of the people of those two regions voted to join Russia, that wouldn't legally make them part of Russia. It is Ukrainian sovereign territory. Now, Ukraine could choose to give it away or negotiate some sort of thing, but that actually wouldn't. Now, Moscow may say this, may play a tu quoque argument, and there'll be some validity in this. What about Kosovo and Montenegro, legally part of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, as was, and they broke away, and NATO countries recognized them, and they held referenda. They declared independence, and were promises it didn't happen, and eventually Western countries recognized them independent countries, and the Serbs are sore about that because they used to be united with Serbia, and Serbia is one of the only European countries which leans towards Russia on the Ukraine war. World leaders have roundly denounced these planned referendums as being a complete farce, as something which can't be taken seriously, a gimmick. This will be a parody democracy that's utterly cynical. Anyway, Russia's been reduced to trying to recruit from prisons. So Yevgeny Prigozhin, Putin's chef, the caterer from St. Petersburg, he was filmed in a prison in Russia a few days ago, trying to get prisoners to join up because they're that short of people to sign up. But people in prison might not be terribly disciplined, may not be in the army for years, rushed through basic training to do 6 months of combat service in Ukraine. But if you desert, you'll be shot. And having said that, of course, I don't think that they will not get 6 months service. They'll be forced to stay and stay and stay. They will always break their promises. So there's been a big problem for Russia. Now they sent some pedagogues into Ukraine to reopen the schools. A lot of Ukrainian teachers fled or just refused to teach Russia's curriculum, to attempt to Russify the children, to really just brainwash them, to misuse children as this sort of political cannon fodder. And so they were offering Russian teachers 10 times the average teacher salary to go there. The Russian teachers are appallingly paid. And you see, by undervaluing education, that causes broader economic problems a generation later. They paid about $400 a month, offering up to $4,000 a month. But some have been arrested and charged with various crimes, with the Ukrainians facing sentences up to 15 years. And obviously, Russia is going to find it increasingly difficult to get teachers who are willing to do that. And Russia also wants to distract attention from the Izum massacre, about 450 corpses dug up, mostly civilians, often shot at close range, showing signs of torture. Assuming that's true, I don't actually know that it's true. And Ukraine is saying the Russians did it, and the Russians saying no, lie, lie, lie. Again, I'm not certain that Russian troops did it, but I think it's highly likely. We've got to see some international investigation. Russia was in charge of that area for 6 months. Now, why on earth would Ukraine come in and do this? And also, you can see from the state of decomposition how long the people have been dead. Because anyway, the Russian government does not deserve the benefit of the doubt. It lies and lies and lies shamelessly, unblushingly, incessantly. The most flagrant, barefaced, blatant lies will be told ad nauseam by the Kremlin regime. Anyway, there was another interesting development. Obviously, in the United Nations, Putin and President Erdogan of Turkey were there, and Erdogan said that Putin told him he'd like to end the war by negotiation soon. So that is interesting. It may well be escalate to de-escalate by upping the ante, by threatening an all-out war and so on. He thinks that maybe he'll negotiate a better deal and get something out of this war, which has not gone well for Russia. I couldn't quite call it a disaster. They've not been driven out the areas they illegally occupied before 2014, but it's certainly not been victorious. You know, they're bogged down in this slogging match at best. Right, thanks for so much for watching my channel. So subscribe on Patreon and donate on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Bye.